Now before I get to the building of the resin, I kind of like to talk about the quality of resin and the castings. I've kind of mentioned this before in some of the past episodes, but the bad thing about resin kits is, depending on who's casting it or who's releasing it or whatever, you're going to get different degrees of how much work you're going to have to put into a resin kit, because a resin kit is a lot of work. If it's a bad casting, if you luck out and get a good casting, it's almost instantaneously you're going to be able to paint it. So first, I'm going to give you an example with Geometric, a resin kit. This is off of their Universal line. Geometric does not cast their own kits, but they did, however, go to Mark Brokaw of Earthbound Studios. With a kit like this, you're just not going to find much more excellent castings. There are a couple seam lines you have to look really hard on this kit. If you look along here, this is probably the worst seam line on the whole kit. And basically, all you're going to have to do is take an X-Acto knife and come in and just kind of scrape a little bit. Scrape like that, and you're going to pretty much get rid of the line. Maybe come in with a little putty to touch it up. Like on the legs, the mold line is non-existent. So this is your best example of a casting which is just superb. You're not going to find much better than this. So we'll move on to the next example, which is going to be the middle of the road. And this is the one I'm going to be working on through most of the episode. This is by Model Master or Testers. This was the resin kit line they did. As you can see here, we have casting blocks. This is like where part of the mold comes together. This is where they're called pour spouts. And if you look along here, you've got a little bit nastier seam line, which is going to require you to grind down a little bit and putty up a little bit. But this is pretty much an average, what I would consider an average casting of a kit. Now we go to possibly some of the worst castings you'll ever see. If you look here, you have a horrendous mold line across here, which is going to require you to grind it down, and then you're going to have to come in with putty and basically re-sculpt the hair detail into that. Some of the pieces aren't too bad, but if you look along here, I don't know if we can catch it with the studio lights or not, but if you look here, you see all this nasty webbing and just this nasty, crunchy looking line. I don't know how to really describe it, but this is called heat webbing. And how this comes about is two reasons. One, either too much catalyst is put into the hardening agent. Well, the catalyst is the hardening agent for the resin, and there's too much put in there, and it heats up too much, and it does this. Or else the mold is just getting so old that no matter how much, you put a little heat onto it, it gets this. Got your regular pour spouts. Again, bad mold line. This is probably right along the shoe if you look here. This is just terrible. You're going to have to really work this. So you're not going to find much more worse castings, And the bad thing about this heat webbing is you're going to have to come in with sandpaper and try to get some of that detail back. You have to smooth it out, and I mean, sorry, you're going to lose detail. So it's quite a pity too, because it's a really nice looking kit. All right, now that I've given you some examples of different types of resin, we're going to kind of I'm going to go in through quick here about some of the tools we're going to need just to get started. First and foremost, a tool that is just imperative when well, it's not imperative, but it definitely it makes it so much easier to build a resin kit, is a Dremel. If you don't have one of these, I suggest you go out and buy one of them. They're fairly cheap. A plug-in one will run you about $60, with some attachments, 70. But it's definitely worth the investment. Another thing you want to have handy is a dust mask, because when you get grinding on resin, it emits, dust and all that, and you just don't want to inhale that into your lungs, because these are chemicals that these kits are made out of. You wouldn't take your mouth and suck on the end of a tailpipe, so you don't want to get that in your lungs either. We're going to need a different variety of glues, but just for starting out, the main thing we're going to need is a Dremel, and we've got a couple attachments with it. So I'm going to put the mask on, and what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to go along and I'm going to cut the pour spout along here. Wow, as you can see, like I said, we really kicked up a lot of dust here. Blow that off. But as you can see with the Dremel, it just cuts right through that like a hot knife through butter. If you were to use a saw or even an X-Acto knife, it'd take you quite a while. But as you can see, we got a pretty good cut. You know, you want to make sure when you're doing that, you can leave as much detail as possible. And with a pour spout like that, it was no problem. Now, if we look along the leg here, we're going to have a little more difficulty cutting into this one because it actually is part of the leg. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to turn, like I like to do, is take, with this Dremel, it's a variable speed, so to slow it down a little bit so you have a little more control, and then start your cut right away through there and get that set up, and then you can come in a little later, you know, kick up the speed and really go into this. So I'm going to work on this leg next. Okay, as you see here, I kind of took along and I followed the line of the leg. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kick the speed of the Dremel back up, and we're going to go ahead and start lopping this off. But as you can see, we've got some angles to work with, so it's better to start planing. So I'm going to go at an angle like this, and then I'm going to come in and angle back like this. All right, we've got it cut off here. Blow some of this dust out of here. I don't know on camera, it might look like there's a snowstorm going on, I'm not sure. All right, and now the next part here along the arms is, you can see what they did with the pour spout here. Along here, it follows, this one follows the line of the arm pretty good, but I can't really show you, but inside, the pour spout is runs right down inside the kit. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to lop it off along that line, and then we're going to put a different attachment on the Dremel and go in and grind it out. So I'm going to go ahead and chop these arm bits off, and then we'll change the piece on the Dremel, the bit. All right, if you look along here, you'll see what I'm talking about. See, down inside the arm, this is actually fitting, the fitting pin here. See, this is supposed to fit into the arm like so. But to use this big cutting tool, it's obviously going to be almost impossible to get in there and grind that out right. So what we're going to have to do is, that's the nice thing about the Dremel, you just pop out the one we're done with. And here, all this is a grinding bit. So what we're going to do, we're going to throw that in. I like to sit them about halfway in. We're going to jack up the speed. Again, make sure to put the mask on. We're going to go in and grind this out a little bit. And as you see with the grinding bit, it's not quite as quick as our cutting piece. So, you know, it's going to take a while to grind down in that one. But you get the general idea how we try to follow along the line. And the cut is, you know, roughly about here. So you got to try to stay with that. But I definitely wanted to show you the other arm too. If you look in this one, it's really, the pour spout is really set deep into this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow along the lines of how I ground out this one. I'm just going to go in, I'm going to grind these out, and the next episode, what I'm going to do when we come back for our other segment, is we're going to adjust part fit, and then what we're going to do is just follow along with what else.